Hi, it's Friday and time to look back at what happened at Queen's Park in Ontario politics this week. The legislature is prorogued. It was prorogued by Premier Ford until October the 4th. And I was reminded recently that that means that a lot of political staffers from the government and official opposition parties are now available to work on getting out their party's vote in the federal election. If you haven't already, don't forget to vote on Monday. First, this week, the Ford government did a whole bunch of polling as revealed by a Freedom of Information request by the CBC. The proof of vaccination rules were released by the government. And the government responded to violence on university campuses. And finally, the Financial Accountability Office of Ontario reported on Q1 expenditures of the provincial government, and in particular, the lack of expenditures from the federal government's $2.7 billion COVID response fund. Keep watching if you'd like to find out more. Otherwise, please join me next week as I look back at what happened at Queen's Park. So first of all, the CBC did some investigative reporting. They did a Freedom of Information request, and they found that the Doug Ford government did 35 polls about their COVID policy between March of 2020 and January of 2021. That's like about once a week. And these polls asked people of Ontario, did the government do all they could? Should they do more? Should they have acted differently? Did they do a good job? Should there be a full lockdown or a regional lockdown? Those kinds of questions. Premier Ford has a majority government, so the government's not in danger of falling, and he has science-based advice to ask on, but he's still very sensitive to public opinion. Normally, governments do need polls to know how the public will respond to rules and regulations and different policies. But there's a constraint, and that is there is the science of epidemiology. There's a science constraint. So the question is, did the government properly balance these two in determining its COVID policy? That's a difficult question to answer, but I think as we look back and evaluate how the province of Ontario responded to the pandemic, this is a question that we need to answer. The government put out its proof of vaccination guidelines and rules. This is otherwise known as a vaccination passport. Generally, the rules cover indoor, non-essential activities, and there are exceptions for things that make sense, like if you want to go inside to go to the bathroom. However, the big question here is that businesses are going to have to do the checking of vaccination documentation. For now, they're going to use the printout that you can get from the Ministry of Health site. There's a question about additional costs incurred by businesses to have an employee do the checking. And there's also intangible costs related to customer relationships. And all of these things have to be borne by businesses at the moment. So that's, I think, one of the main questions right now about how to implement the use of proof of vaccination. This week, there was some sad news. Violence on campuses. Sexual violence is a long-standing problem on university campuses, and it became a headline with several incidents at Western University, which coincided with an assault leading to the death of a first-year student. And what I would say that the numbers, if you look at the numbers, Western University should not be singled out, and neither should this point in time. It's a long-standing problem. The Ontario government this week required an upgrade of sexual violence policies at post-secondary institutions. The opposition party said it wasn't enough. Having attended university in Ontario decades ago, I think this is a deep cultural problem requiring sustained efforts inside and outside of government. The Financial Accountability Office of Ontario reported on Q1 spending, so that's April, May, and June. Q1 spending in Ontario, there was roughly $2.7 billion of federal COVID funds that were not spent as of June the 30th. The question is, could our provincial government have done more during the third wave this spring, or done more to prepare for the fourth wave that we are in right now? Were they penny wise, trying to save some money here and there, and pound foolish in getting ahead of COVID to end this pandemic? Should they have been spending some money to help end the pandemic faster? The government says that there were costs incurred. They just haven't been paid out yet, and they will appear in the quarter two. So we'll be looking at quarter two, and we'll be asking the question, could the government have been more proactive to end this pandemic sooner? Thanks for watching, and tell me what you think about this in the comments below. Please join me next week as I look back at what happened at Queen's Park and in Ontario politics.